Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
I'll be playing college football.
How's that for pomp and circumstance? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. Good to be back after a couple weeks out. And listen, it's a big deal anytime Alabama gets a commitment, but when it's a local product, it's even more so. Four-star offensive line target Wilkin Formby announced his college decision last night at Northridge High School in Tuscaloosa. He's rated as a four-star recruit and is considered a top tackle prospect. His final four was Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. The Northridge product has the prototypical size for a D1 offensive tackle at 6'8" and 300 pounds. He's got long arms. What a wingspan. Quick feet. Really, honestly, Rodney has the potential to one day, like so many other Alabama offensive linemen, play in the National Football League. Now, all four of his finalists did a terrific job recruiting the Northridge Star. But in the end, the local and family ties to Alabama swung the pendulum in the Crimson Tide's favor, Rodney. Let's talk about this. Again, you felt like ultimately he'd wind up at Alabama, but I had him on my radio show this morning too, and he said, you know what, I had an unbelievable relationship with Lane Kiffin. Oklahoma coaches did an incredible job. He said it was the toughest choice he's ever made in his young life, and I really believe that. He had to think about it, but in the end, Nick Saban, Alabama, hometown team went out.
Yeah, and I spoke to his father last night, and that's exactly what he said, Gary. He said, listen, he said the night before, calling the coaches was one of the most difficult things he's ever had to do. And, you know, Wilkin Formby is one of the top 10 offensive tackles in this class right now in the 2023 class nationally. He's a guy that by the end of this process, I think he'll be even higher than that, possibly top 5. You know, he's just massive. I mean, he's 6'8". He weighed 314 pounds yesterday when I spoke to him. He's a guy that's probably going to play at 335, 340. And when I tell you, Gary, physically, he reminds me a lot of Wesley Brett, the former Alabama star who came in from Coleman when he was coming out of high school. Has that same kind of height, but I think he's more developed at this same stage than Wesley was physically. Very, very impressive.
Yeah, he took a serious look at other schools, especially Oklahoma and Ole Miss. He visited Alabama 11 days ago and then announced for the Tide last night. You think that visit is really, even though he's been there many times, is what secured it in his mind, and he just decided to go ahead and do it? You
know, I really think there was probably a lot of factors involved. You mentioned some of them. Obviously, the ties. You know, his grandfather played here, was recruited here as a junior college punter under Coach Bryant. Right. Obviously, that was a key factor. He's got a lot of ties to the school. But I really think that Coach Eric Wolford and the Alabama coaching staff just did a fantastic job in terms of really selling him on what they were looking for and how he was a fit for this program.
Yeah, Ronnie, too, getting back to the local hook. I mean, Alabama recruits nationally, and they recruit the best players in the country. It's honestly, and there have been some really good players, it's not that common for Alabama to take a commit or sign a player from right here in Tuscaloosa. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when probably you had more West Alabama kids that did get opportunities like this. And, you know, it just hasn't been as much Alabama recruiting on a national level. They're recruiting on a higher level, Gary, under Nick Saban, obviously. So they go nationally, get the best of the best. But, you know, a lot of people say, well, and it's typical. This is typical of what happens when you sign a local kid. Is he really that good? Yeah, he really is. I mean, he's gone to camps. He's dominated camps. He's a guy that's made a lot of progress over the last year and a half. And you know, you talked about Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss had him the #1 offensive tackle on their board. Oklahoma wanted him desperately. I've fielded a lot of calls from, you know, kind of my fellow recruiting reporters out in Oklahoma really want to know what's the scoop on this guy. Oklahoma really wants him. So, you know, USC offered him. From USC to Penn State, he had offers.
Yeah, you mentioned Eric Wolford. He played, you know, he had started recruiting Wilkin when he was at Kentucky, and they had already built a relationship, and it carried over. All right, we know how Alabama recruits on the offensive line. Terrific. And you have to, because it's a hit and miss proposition with some of these guys. That's one tackle, the 5th overall commit. How many more tackles will Alabama look to take in this class?
You know, it's interesting, and I kind of touched on this with Wilkin last night, how they're going to recruit the offensive line. And I really think they're looking for several guys who can play offensive tackle, Gary, but have the versatility. They can move them inside. But they want guys that are versatile enough to play that tackle spot. Right now, he's the first one. I think if things went really well in terms of getting who they want to get, they could possibly go up to 6, maybe for sure 5, I would think. They're in on some of the top guys in the country. So, you know, I think this is going to be an outstanding offensive line group.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A great start with Wilkin Formby from Northridge High School in Tuscaloosa. All right, let's move on. And recruiting has been a hot topic all month long with camps and official visits. This past weekend, 6'5", 225-pound recruit Jelani Thurman was an official visitor. He's a top-notch tight end. He wasn't the only recruit to visit this weekend. The nation's top safety, Caleb Downs, made an appearance in Tuscaloosa. As Alabama isn't the only school on his mind, though, he also visited Georgia and Notre Dame. Ohio State is on his list as well. Peter Woods of Thompson, one of the top prospects in-state, great in-state year. The 5-star defensive line had visited Clemson earlier this month. He was in town, and he's going to announce on July the 8th. And Alabama isn't the only SEC school that 4-star JUCO wide receiver Malik Benson visited this weekend. He also went to Georgia. Rodney, let's start with this past weekend and some of these guys that I mentioned and others that are really high on Alabama's radar.
Yeah, I think really when you look at those guys, the one that kind of jumps out, not in the group, but the first one that jumps out among the ones you listed would be Caleb Downs, the #1 safety in the country. Out of the state of Georgia. You mentioned all his visits. He's been to Georgia. He's been to Notre Dame, Alabama. He's going to Ohio State. Caleb Downs is just a fantastic player. I think Alabama did a really, really good job with him while he was here this weekend. Now, his father is a coach, so, you know, they kind of know what it's all about. They know what to look for. If Alabama can pull off Caleb Downs, and I think they're in good position, this visit to Ohio State would certainly be key, but that would be a major coup. There's no question about that. You mentioned Jelani Thurman. He's a tight end that is a good-looking prospect as well. And the other guys, I mean, Malik Benson, he might be the #1 junior college wide receiver in the country. We'll talk to his coach tomorrow after he's wrapped up all these visits. So, I think right now, Gary, overall, Alabama's looking in terms of, kind of building those relationships. They're in really good position. But the one you mentioned that we really need to talk about, I think, is Peter Woods.
Yeah, let's get to Woods because it's been long assumed that the Thompson standout is going to wind up at Alabama. He has announced a commit date for July the 8th. But, Rodney, Clemson, man, and listen, Clemson's a great program, and they've got a great defensive line tradition there. They have really factored in here. A couple of other schools are on his list, including Jackson State. But I take it, talking to you Monday morning on my radio show, not a given right now that he's going to commit to the Crimson Tide.
Gary, it's hard to imagine that Peter Woods won't end up at Alabama. But, there's a lot of buzz at Clemson. There's even buzz that and I don't know this, but this is what's coming out of Clemson, is that he privately committed to Dabo Swinney when he was there a couple of weeks ago. Now, I don't know if that's a fact or not, but that's certainly something that a lot of their moderators are suggesting on their board. So, listen, I know that he really likes their defensive line coach, Nick Saban. I know that they relate really well to Dabo Swinney, but still, this is Alabama. This is Thompson High School. It's 50 miles down the road. Nobody really produces them better than Alabama. So this is a guy that, to me, if there's one guy in the state, and there's a lot of really good ones, I'm not diminishing them at all, but this is a guy that I would think you just can't lose.
Yeah, and we'll see, July the 8th, but I just got a feeling when it's all said and done. Remember, Alexander's here now. Jeremiah Alexander, one of his best friends from last year's class, so we'll see on July the 8th. All right, more recruiting, of course, next week, and we'll keep you updated. All right, let's move on. Former Alabama softball player Jenna Lord, who finished up at Hewitt-Trussville her senior year, will transfer to Ole Miss for a sophomore season. This past season, she appeared in 45 games as a freshman, started 30. She had a batting average of .289, 2 home runs, 19 RBI. Like so many of these Alabama freshmen, she entered the portal, and now she's headed to play in the SEC against Alabama for Ole Miss. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, some big-time schedule announcements for Alabama basketball. We, of course, have the details. And the NBA draft is Thursday night. We'll tell you what the draft experts are saying about the Crimson Tide draft hopefuls and where they could land. That's coming up. And we'll be getting your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number, 205-348-WVOA. That's 348-9882. There's the email address, or you can tweet at us. Use the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the award-winning Tider Insider TV. And we're back here on Tider Insider Television, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Well, Alabama has 3 players that are hoping to hear their names called Thursday night at the NBA draft at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. The former Crimson Tiders that are hoping to be drafted include guard Jaden Shackelford, guard Keon Ellis, and freshman point guard J.D. Davison. Now, right now, Davison is being projected to be the first Tide player off the board, maybe the only player to be drafted. He's picked to go right around 48 or 50 in the second round. There's a chance Ellis could squeeze in that second round as well. Shackelford, more than likely, is going to be a free agent signee, but all 3 of these guys are going to have an opportunity to play in the NBA. And even if you're a second-round pick, we saw it with Mo Williams. We just saw it last year with Herb Jones. If you're good enough as a second-rounder, you can really make a name for yourself and still make some serious money, and that's what Herb Jones did. So we'll keep an eye on J.D. Davison. I do think, Rodney, he'll be drafted as a true freshman, 19 years old, not going to go in the first round, which is disappointing. But as I said, there's precedent to go ahead and have a good career. Ellis might slip into that second round, might wind up being a free agent. Same thing with Shackelford, probably a free agent for him. But still, Rodney, you have to look at it like this. Since Nate Oates has been here, you've had first rounders, you've had second rounders, you got guys getting opportunities in the NBA. It's clear that the talent level that he's bringing in, and some of it was, holdovers from Avery Johnson, but still, Alabama's talent level continues to go up.
Yeah, it does, and obviously they had a great recruiting class that's coming in. A lot of excitement about this group that he's bringing in and recruited extremely well. But Gary, you just wonder, J.D. Davison, you mentioned it. It's not like he can't make it and can't be successful, but, would it have been better for him to have come back for another year to improve his stock?
I think it would have been, but this was one of those deals where he told the coaches coming in, he and his family had predetermined that they were going to play 1 year, period. So you have to respect that. And again, one thing about him, 19 years old. So if a team drafted him in the second round, they don't have to push him out there right away. And I think he's got a chance to have a long NBA career. Because, listen, he needs to be more refined as a basketball player. But athletic-wise, Rodney, athletic ability, he's a 10. I mean, he's off the charts. Staying with basketball, it's time now for Coach Talk. Crimson Tide basketball in the CM Newton Classic made it official recently. The Tide will play Gonzaga at Legacy Arena in Birmingham on Saturday, December 17th. Remember, this is a return game. Alabama went to Seattle last year. It's also, Birmingham is one of the host sites for next season's NCAA tournament. So Crimson Tide head coach Nate Oates says he believes success in the CM Newton Classic will help Alabama get back to Birmingham for March Madness.
Shoot, 2 years ago when we were a 2 seed. If we're a 2 seed again, I'm sure we'll be in Birmingham. So we need to get our seed back up where it was a couple years ago.
Give a little.
It's not enough to just make the tournament around here anymore. When I got here, they just asked me to get in the tournament. Now everybody wants us to be seeded high enough to play in Birmingham. So that's what we're going to try to do.
And in addition to the CM Newton announcement, the SEC Big 12 Challenge matchups are out. Crimson Tide will travel to Norman, Oklahoma to face the Sooners on January 28th. 2023. This is the third time Bama and Oklahoma have been paired together in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. In 2018, the Tide won 80-73 in Coleman Coliseum. 2 years ago, the Sooners scored a 66-61 win out in Norman. Well, Alabama basketball has an open scholarship. They got 12 players scheduled to be on the roster. You're allowed 13. So the question is, will Alabama use that one? Rodney, I think the answer is simply this. If they can get another quality player, whether through the portal or somebody's out there available, then I think they would look to add. But otherwise, you don't want to just bring a player in just for the sake of bringing in a player.
Yeah, and it sounded like when Nate Oates has commented on the past, Gary, that he really hasn't been that concerned about it. He said, if we don't have 13, we don't have 13.
Yeah, you can only play 5 at a time anyway. And you can also obviously fill out your practice roster with walk-ons. But Alabama, as we've talked about, has a great class coming in. Transfer players Mark Sears and Dom Welch. Then those true freshmen, Brandon Miller, Jalen Bradley, Rylan Griffin, Noah Clowney, and the junior college power forward Nick Pringle. So a lot of good-looking new players will make up the Alabama roster in 2022-2023. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, a former Alabama wide receiver is making noise at the Ravens minicamp. And next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number 205-348-9882. Go ahead and give us a call now so you can get through, or you can email us at TITV@WVUA23.com. We'll be right back with Tider TV on a Tuesday night in Tuscaloosa. Now, former Crimson Tide wide receiver Slade Bolton, in all honesty, probably faces an uphill battle trying to make the Baltimore Ravens, but he was impressive recently in the Ravens minicamp. There you see the deep shot he caught from Lamar Jackson. Now, he went undrafted, but again, tough kid. It wouldn't be surprising to me if he makes that Ravens roster in 2023. Welcome back into TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Let's head out on the phone lines. And first up tonight is our pal Caleb up in Hubbardville. Hey, Caleb.
Hey, guys. Hope y'all are doing okay.
Yes, sir.
Hey, welcome back, Gary.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was wanting to know about the big tackle from Iowa.
Proctor?
Yeah, the Proctor.
Yeah. All right, Caleb. He is a big tackle. And Rodney ran it down earlier. Alabama's after him this year in the recruiting class. Already got Wilkin Formby committed. This is a kid that's down to Alabama and Iowa. Iowa is the home state. They have produced a lot of good offensive linemen in their own right. But 19 Alabama linemen have been drafted by the NFL since Nick Saban's been here. I think it's going to come down, does he want to stay home? Or does he want to come down to Tuscaloosa?
You know, I really look at a guy like Caden Proctor and you say, okay, Iowa has produced. They've had a lot of success producing offensive linemen. He could stay home. But listen, the difference is, to me, is you come to Alabama if you're a guy like Caden Proctor and you compete every day against the Will Andersons, the Dallas Turners. You don't see that at Iowa. And you probably don't see that in the season, maybe occasionally at Ohio State or when you're playing Michigan. But, I mean, you see that every week, every day in practice, and then every week in the SEC against the top competition. So if he really wants to be prepared for the next level, is that something that he's going to consider strongly? You know, again, he's got a lot of ties to Iowa, Gary. He's got some former teammates there playing there now. But, you know, we'll have to see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if he waits until the fall. He wants to visit here for a game to kind of get that atmosphere. So we'll see, but Alabama's certainly in the top two.
All right, thank you for the phone call there in Hubbardville, Caleb. All right, let's go to our petty Plato and Panorama is with us. Hey, Plato, what's up, buddy?
Hey, guys, how you doing? Gary, glad to see you back, and I hope you're feeling better.
Thanks.
I'm real concerned with our defensive line recruiting. I know you touched on early in the show Peter Woods, and there's a likelihood that he may go out of state. And we just don't hear a lot about any of the out-of-state defensive line prospects. Can you shed some light on that? On somebody we maybe...
Sure will, Plato. Well, first of all, the reason you're not hearing as much about out-of-state defensive linemen is, Rodney, it's a loaded in-state class. Right. Woods is just one of many. Jan J. Pierre, who's already recruited to Alabama. But you start, when you have a year like Alabama's got this year in-state, you know, Kelby Collins, you're going to start in-state first. Yeah, and it's a huge year for that, Gary. When you talk about James Smith as a five-star player at Montgomery Carver, you know, we've talked about Peter Woods. I mean, he's one of the top defensive linemen in the country. You mentioned Kelby Collins at Gardendale. But there are two that are coming in this weekend that are really highly touted players. Edric Hill from Kansas City, the Kansas City area. Out of Missouri, he's a really highly touted player. Jordan Renaud, I really like out of the state of Texas. I think he's a really tremendous prospect. He'll come in for a visit as well. So, you know, they are certainly recruiting others out of state. And again, it's a long process. This is June. You know, a lot of times you see guys kind of come more on the radar, you know, later as we move along. So we'll see. All right. Thanks, Plato, for the phone call there in Panorama. All right, we'll be back with more TITV, more phone calls and emails. Coming up, you stay with us right here on WVUA 23. Welcome back to Tider Insider Television with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris, and it's time to get to an email, and it's our email question of the day, brought to you by KDM Services, serving your family like our family for all your heating and air conditioning needs. It's KDM Services. All right, here is the email. What do you guys know about basketball commit Sam Walters? This is from Terry in Northport. Well, we know he's good, and we know that, you know, Cade Phillips was a guy that Alabama took a long look at from in-state. Of course, we know he's got strong family ties to the Crimson Tide with his parents having both attended and played sports here. His grandfather, John Coyle, played football for Coach Bryant. His uncle, Brody Coyle, was a great quarterback for Alabama. But I understand that Alabama likes Sam Walters better. 6'8" forward out of Florida at the Villages Charter School. Georgetown, LSU, Florida, and others. Antoine Petway got him to commit. And Rodney, he's a guy that's 26 points a game last year. similar, they say, to Herb Jones, maybe in terms of his style and maybe a little bit better shooter. But Alabama likes him a lot and, you know, got an early commitment from him. So clearly they think he's a guy that can come in here and help the program.
We know he's real thin, too. 6'8", 180. Guy that is going to fill out, but he can really shoot the three. Gary, I think that's one thing at his size, the way he can, you know, shoot the ball. Obviously, that fits in really, really well. When you recruit a guy, you want to make sure he fits your system, and that's what it sounds like. He fits
All right, let's
the
get
system.
to a phone call. Ricky in Gainesville. Ricky, is this Gainesville, Florida, or Gainesville, Alabama?
It's Galesville, Alabama.
Galesville. Okay, got you. They told me Galesville. All right, Ricky, go ahead. We got about a minute.
Yes, well, yeah, I just want to say enjoy y'all's show.
Thank you.
My question is, I know we're talking a lot of football recruiting, but my question is, what is Patrick going to do about our hitting? Looks like we need a hitting coach, or we need to do something because all the other leagues are.
All right, Ricky, softball-wise, listen, they started out like a house of fire this past season, knocking the cover off the ball. You're right, probably didn't hit well enough. It's something, I guarantee you, he's a Hall of Famer. He's going to do what he needs to do to get that hitting going, Ricky. I've got faith in Patrick Murphy. All right, thanks for the phone calls and emails. We'll be back to wrap it up on a beautiful evening here in the City of Champions right after this. Former Crimson Tide safety Minkah Fitzpatrick signs a 4-year extension with the Steelers, making him the highest-paid safety in NFL history. $72 million is the deal. That's $18.4 million a year over 4 years. $36 million signing bonus. He's now under contract through 2027, and he's a good player, but also just a star off the field as well. Nice job there by Minkah and the Steelers. And we want to thank you for tuning in to Tider Insider TV tonight. I want to thank Stu McCann for sitting in for me the last couple of weeks. A reminder that if you missed any of the show, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 or find it anytime at WVUA23.com. We're going to leave you tonight with some video from the Nike Skills Camp last week at Hillcrest High School featuring Alabama football players. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy this video as we go out, and we'll talk to you again next week right here on TITV.